Get to 10. Howdy, folks. This is Liberation Lighthouse with Rod and Chris, where we create a safe space for you to talk about trauma. And not only talk about it, we will discuss it in detail, and we will also discuss the things that are out there to help us deal with it: trauma, PTSD, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, all the good things in life. Um, just a heads up, we've been having some technical difficulties with our audio. So please, if you are out there and you are not able to hear one of us, please let us know in the chats. Again, go down to your YouTube, preferably on your computer. I think I'm not sure where it is on the phone. Scroll a little bit lower in the chat section. Feel free to let us know what's going on.
So I'll just talk for a moment so that people have an opportunity to know if they can hear our voice. What's going on, and this is the pure joy of live shows, is I can hear Rod. The levels seem to be indicating that you should be able to hear me. Rod can't hear me right now. So the beautiful thing is I do have a phone going. We've figured this out. But we're just playing with technical difficulties. So let us know if you're not hearing both of us. Otherwise, I think we've got this well enough to work and we can actually jump into today's topic. Yes, you can't keep us down, internet. We're coming in with neurofeedback therapy. You can't stop it. We're here. Try to stop us, techno spirits.
The little gremlins of the world, I tell you. So if you're hearing Chris and he sounds a little bit tinny or canny, and there's a little bit of a delay, it's because I am listening to him over my phone. Not the best sound quality. However, I have my phone to the side as to not interrupt him, so that if you are able to hear him through the channel, it doesn't sound as echoey for you on the back end. Tonight's episode, Neuro-feedback therapy. Dun, dun, dun.
Dude, wait, hold on. Let's just acknowledge for a second. Episode 13.
Lucky 13.
On a Friday.
On a Friday.
The 17th.
Well, not as creepy as it could be, I guess. But it's yeah.
Close.
Yeah. Episode 13 on a Friday, the 17th.
Yeah.
All right. So, what is neurofeedback therapy? And please forgive me. English is my second language. I do remind people of this from time to time as I fumble my way through reading some of your more collegiate acronyms and words that are out there.
Yes, and Mr. Plow has only one bachelor degree. And how many degrees do you hold?
I don't know. I don't want to get into that. But anyways, I'm still paying on them. Neurofeedback or electroencephalography, EEG, which I can pronounce EEG.
Damn it. EEG, way better.
In medical terms, is a non-invasive way to control and measure your brain waves and body temperature. This form of therapy allows your neurofeedback provider to retain an otherwise involuntary body process, i.e. your brain waves, through conditioning. Think more like Pavlov, if you can remember some high school science classes, where you would ring a bell and the Pavlovian response would be to have a dog drool because he was ready for his meal.
Yeah,
and that's kind of making me salivate.
On like a really basic level, because you can read the brainwaves, sometimes you can stimulate, but more importantly, you can read them. You can get immediate feedback, right? So like imagine you're trying to learn to meditate or something, and like you're like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? What's it supposed to feel like? What's going on? And like, it takes a period of time. And that period of time could be, if you're lucky, a day. But for many people, weeks or months before you finally begin to get the feeling, no, I'm doing this right. Okay. Whereas with neurofeedback, like the brainwaves can be read, and then you can get some type of feedback. Often it'd be audio, like a little like pleasant ding, ding, ding in the ear, like, oh, I'm doing it right. And in that moment, you're getting it. It's like why sports, like if you're going to shoot a basketball, you get immediate feedback. You either made it or you didn't. And then you know how to adjust and you get to repeat until you get better way, way, way faster. Imagine if you had to shoot a basketball and you didn't find out if you were doing it right till a week later. Like, how long would it take to actually ingrain or do something? It'd be way more challenging to become good and proficient at something. So, this is where this can completely change the game in both meditative states as well as rewiring the brain and being able to move through the patterns that trauma, emotions, PTSD can represent.
It would be like having a coach right there with you telling you if your brain is doing it right, which it's
Yes.
kind of trippy, but kind of cool at the same time.
Yes, and we'll get to this later on in the episode, but I've experienced this in a super high-end way. You don't have to do it that way. There's many levels to do this, and we'll share this as well. But are some experiences we have to share within this later in the episode too.
So, the origins of neurofeedback. And if you have the time, I do suggest you click that link down there. It's all kinds of fun about cats and going all the way to NASA and astronauts. But neurofeedback first began in the late 1950s and 1960s. Dr. Joe Camilla conducted studies using EEGs to look at consciousness. He found that by using a simple reward system, his subjects could change their brain activity. I think back, and this might help Josh a little bit. I think back to an episode of The Big Bang Theory where Dr. Sheldon is trying to train Penny by giving her positive reinforcement, i.e., feeding her little bits of chocolate anytime that she does something that he considers to be a positive thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and we all work this way, right? So yes, it works in training dogs. It works in training people. More importantly, it works in training the brain. And the reward could be as simple as a pleasing sound. What's fascinating, well, again, we'll go in more depth later, is that the brain will automatically, like we're wired this way, it'll automatically begin to optimize around this. You can consciously put your attention there, which helps it along, but you don't have to. Literally, your brain will begin to adjust and rewire and attune to the reward on its own. It's just how our brains work.
Yep. So, when it's used, children, adolescents, and adults with seizure conditions, behavior disorders, attention deficit, autism, ongoing developmental delays, acquired brain injuries, traumatic brain injuries, birth trauma, anxiety, depression, PTSD, stress related problems, and insomnia or interrupted sleep patterns, as well as those with age related cognitive loss, may find neurofeedback helpful. Neurofeedback may also be used as an adjunct intervention with other forms of therapy. Keyword being with other forms of therapy.
Yeah, and this is where I believe it's powerful. It's very useful on its own for certain things, but more powerful when you begin to combine it with the other therapies that you're finding useful in the moment.
So, how does it work? When you begin the treatment, you'll map out the brain through quantitative EEG or QEEG. This will help identify what specific areas of your brain are out of alignment. Once you have this important baseline information, your neurofeedback training can be tailored to the areas that need a little TLC. And during your sessions, sensors are placed through targeted areas on your head to show the current state of your brain compared to what is or what should it be doing. Sounds or music is played through your headphones, and they will help you and adapt or push your brain closer to a more comfortable state. That is it. Pain free, drug free, and completely non invasive, unless the things on your head are itchy or something along those lines. And all you have to do is show up and relax.
Yeah, it is surprising. Again, you can choose to put effort into it. You can choose not to. It's going to work either way. Putting some conscious effort in can help it along, but it's really surprising how well this whole system works on its own. Yeah, I'll share the rest of the comments later on when we get to some other parts. I'm just getting
The
excited and
whole idea
getting
of having all
ahead
these
of us.
things, kind of wrapped around your head, it reminds me of Harry Potter. When they put the hat on and the hat just kind of reads your brain waves and determines which house you're going to go to.
Oh, interesting. I didn't have that view of it. Yeah. It it does that. And like there's other analogies here too. Like for those of us who are into computers, like and if you build your own, like you can switch out the components of computer in order to optimize it for certain things. Like there's a bit of that that's going on. If you're a car junkie, then like essentially like you have a stock car, but you can also take that stock car and you could change things out, right? You can put a supercharger in it to be able to do better at this. You can change the suspension so that it handles better. Um, you actually have that level of adaptability and that level of tuning, if you will, to the brain because of its neuroplasticity. Like that's pretty incredible. Like we often go, well, this is just the way that I am. I just have to deal with it. Like, no, like tools like this are accelerating what would normally happen through meditation or other practices, but you get to be an active participant in it, gives you agency control. Like that's freaking amazing.
I do like that analogy, the idea of just adding a tuner to your brain to better help you function, run better. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of like a
Or like just
cool
things
visual
just
in
like
my head.
just fix it up a little bit. So imagine you've got a car and the wiring to the rear turn signals like got like eaten up by a rat, right? So what would you do? You could either drive around with no turn signals all the time and keep getting in trouble and having people like what the heck is this guy doing? Or you could run some more wires, have them back to the back, and everything's working just as it was before again.
And so, if that was the tuner, these are the diagnostics here. So, the common brainwave frequency, delta, has a frequency of 1 to 4 hertz. The characteristics are sleep, repair, complex problem solving, unawareness, deep unconsciousness. Then you have theta from 4 to 8, creativity, insight, deep states, unconsciousness, optimal meditative state, depression, anxiety, and distractibility. What? We got alpha,
Squirrel.
going from 8 to 13, alertness and peacefulness. That almost seems like opposite ends of the spectrum to me. Readiness, again, meditation and deeply relaxed. Then you got your lower alpha from 8 to 10, recalling, your upper alpha from 10 to 13, optimizing cognitive performance, your SMR or your sensory motor rhythm from 13 to 15, which deals with mental alertness and physical relaxation. You got your beta from 15 to 20, thinking, focusing, sustained attention, tension, alertness, and excitement. Your high beta from 20 to 32, which is intensity, hyper alertness, which is something that we suffer with PTSD, and anxiety. And lastly, I know my name's covering it, but it says gamma. And gamma is from 32 to 100 or 40. It involves learning, cognitive processing, problem solving, tasks, mental sharpness, brain activity, and organizing the brain.
So to put some context towards this, right? So these help you understand what the different brain like states are. Why are they important? So day to day, when we're in the state of I need to get things done, right? Okay, I've got my to-do list, or I'm working at my job, or whatever else. We're almost entirely in beta. Beta is a great place. Beta is about productivity, getting things done, thinking things through, sometimes strategy, stuff like that. It's important. We need to do it. The challenge is our day-to-day lives often are focused around being in beta all the time. And that's not optimal for the brain. It's not optimal for the entire system. For those of us who've had trauma, PTSD, things like that, like something that promotes the need to be more aware and hyper aware, then we go into the high beta, right? And that high beta, again, is around vigilance, like always being aware of what could come at you. The challenge is when you're in that state, you're less connected with your emotions, right? Because you want to be alert and aware. You're not processing your emotions. but you're also not getting into the states that we've talked about before in previous episodes about rest and digest. Right? We start talking about the limbic nervous system and going from either like the alertness or sometimes fight or flight to rest and digest. And so if your body doesn't have a chance to rest, you're not getting to that point where you actually get really deep sleeps. You're not getting to the point where your body is repairing itself. You're not getting to the point where you are more centered, let's say, to use slightly woo words, but more centered in the heart, more connected and compassionate. Then you stay up here all the time and you may get things done, but it's like everything else begins to build up. So beta is where most people spend their time all the time. High beta tends to be for those of us who have experienced or constantly experience hypervigilance. When we start getting lower than that, I'm just going to talk about alpha as a whole. Alpha as a whole is the brain state that there's a lot of scientific research around, particularly from an institute called HeartMath. And in that state, what you do is you feel more centered within yourself typically. You feel more open, you feel more peaceful, you feel more connected to your own emotions. You are able to connect emotionally with others. Great for relationships. Also, it's been shown that going into that state begins to allow emotions and anything that might be challenging to be able to come up, to be able to be processed, and to be able to be released. Right. So if you're in beta all the time, imagine like your emotions or the other things going on in the body. It's like beginning to build. And if you have a traumatic experience, it can be like, it can build a lot. When you go into alpha, it's like, you're releasing, you're letting all of that out. And it tends to be a way more pleasant place to be because you feel often very peaceful and connected with oneself. Theta is that space that's kind of like daydreamy. You're not asleep fully, but you're also usually not fully awake. It's a great place to daydream, to create, to think, to envision, to imagine. Those people who like manifesting, it tends to be the manifesting state. But what can be really incredible about theta and going down into there is like you get access to the unconscious, the stuff that's going on beyond your level of consciousness. And so we'll talk about this a little bit more when I talk about my experience at 40 years of Zen. But you were able to utilize a combination of these. You could go down into theta, and it's like you could go down into the unconscious and you could find the stuff that needed some care, love, and attention, or needed to be processed, or needed to be released. And then you could bring yourself to alpha, and it's like you had the emotions that needed to be released, and you could release them. And it was almost like my experience of it was like going down into the muck, picking up some muck, bringing it into the light, and just watching it dissolve. And so you could do that over and over. Delta, so the lowest brain wavelengths, are like when you are in your deepest sleep, like you're out to the world. Often you're not even dreaming. As a matter of fact, I don't think you dream at all in Delta, but I'm not a doctor. You don't have to hold me to that. The power of that is when your brain, your body, everything just goes through an incredible restoration process. When you've had one of those sleeps where you wake up and you're like, oh, I feel like a new person. That's often because you had a good amount of that delta brainwave length during the sleep. Doesn't have to only happen during sleep, but that's predominantly in deep sleeps is when it happens. Now, so imagine like we just went from beta and we kept going down in brain wavelengths. They've just gotten slower and slower and slower. So we went from beta down to alpha, down to theta, down to delta, right? Calmer, more peaceful, more restorative, more beautiful. Strangely, on the other end of the spectrum, now going up really high, which is where Rod was saying, starts at 32, can go up to 100. Matter of fact, it may go up even substantially more than that, is this brain wavelengths that they've categorized as gamma. And for a long time, people didn't believe this could exist because it wasn't measured. And where they began to find this is when they began to measure the brains of Tibetan monks who have meditated literally for decades. And they were able to hit a state that when they began measuring it was hard to measure because the equipment that people had couldn't measure brain wavelengths that fast. They didn't even believe they existed. But what's fascinating about the gamma space, when you get there, gamma is what automatically happens in the brain when you have that aha moment, when you're like, man, I've got this challenge, I've got this problem, what's going on? And then like, oh, I know what to do. Like when you feel that, your brain has spiked into gamma, the realization has come, and then it continues on and you do what you need to do. Often you go back to beta. But when you stay in gamma, that is the place that Tibetan monks learned to get to. And it is like you are aware. So you're not asleep, you're not getting more and more tired as like you get with theta and delta, but you're very aware of everything. And yet you feel the most peaceful you've ever felt. You feel it's that feeling of being connected to all, that feeling of, for many people, a very spiritual experience, like being connected to one's higher self, being connected to spirit, God, whatever it is that you identify it as, tends to be the deepest levels of peace and compassion that beings feel. So it's an incredible space to be able to get to. And I've had the fortunate ability to, with some of this neurofeedback equipment, be able to validate and learn how to get to each of these. Gamma for me was the most challenging to be able to get to. But when I could get there, and I'm definitely not a Tibetan monk, but when I could get there, it was very rewarding. And it's really fascinating that this super high wavelength, brain wavelength, can be and is often more peaceful than lower brain wavelengths like beta, which are all about getting shit done.
It's funny that it's to me it's almost like tuning in an old radio where you're just kind of like tweaking it to get that fidelity, that perfect pitch to come in for that song to come in clearly. The other thing I was thinking of as you were going through all of these, especially through Theta, for those of you that ever know of Salvador Dali or art
Yeah.
history or anything like that, Salvador Dali would not allow himself to go into delta sleep. He would wait for himself to start dreaming, and then he would intentionally wake himself up. Probably not the healthiest thing to do, but it also allowed him to create a lot of his art throughout his life. That was one of the things that I do remember learning about Dali when I was in school back in the day.
100%. What he had learned to do is he would hold coins or keys in his hand and like be in a chair and begin to doze. And as soon as he would doze too far, they would drop and it would wake him up.
Cool.
And what he was doing is that was his method of being able to dip down into theta, like true creativity. That's where a lot of art and inspiration comes from. And then in that moment when he woke up, it was still there, kind of like when you wake up and you can still remember your dream before it fades. And then he would work from that place. And your analogy, thank you for it, about the radio stations is awesome, right? Because all of these brain wavelengths are helpful. We need them all, right? So there's going to be a time when you're like, I want to work out. Great. You're going to tune into the station that's a little more energized and a little more like upbeat, like, na, 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 let's do this, right? That's more like beta and high beta. And then you get to a point you're like, oh, I just want to sit back. I want to, for me, like, actually enjoy kombucha more. I mean, I've become so much a different person. But like sometimes like a bourbon or whatever else. And I just want to sit back and I want to relax and I just want to let the day go a little bit. And then I can be back home, be present with all the people I care about, whatever else. That's like going down into alpha. And so each of these are useful, and learning to tune your brain into them is like those different things. Sometimes you want that rock. Sometimes you want the smooth jazz, or maybe not the smooth jazz, but whatever it is for you.
Whatever relaxes you.
Yeah.
So, how does it work? Neurofeedback is not considered a cure, but rather a method of managing or regulating the workings of the brain so that it functions in a healthier manner. This is achieved by repeated training sessions using a computerized neurofeedback program that teaches your central nervous system to reorganize and regulate brainwave frequencies. Neurofeedback assesses your brain and provides information about areas of dysfunction that are causing symptoms so that they can be treated directly so you can address them. Various neurofeedback methods and equipment are used for different types of neurological problems. Again, the idea of a radio getting tuned in to get the best fidelity streaming through your speakers.
Yeah. And also rewiring how the brain works, right? So, like when you've experienced a lot of trauma, certain parts of the brain will be more active and will stay more active for longer. And so, what you're doing with this as well is you're helping different parts of the brain reconnect so that you have a more interconnected brain, often allowing you greater emotional control, allowing you greater control over your attention. Um, these things can help with some of the symptoms that can come out of trauma, such as ADHD, etc.
Yep, definitely familiar with some of those symptoms. So, can neurofeedback be harmful? Not if you go to someone who uses their equipment properly. As long as the provider has certified training and a profound understanding of how the brain works, you'll be able to find relief from whatever condition that you're battling. Any adverse side effects reported after your treatment are used as feedback to let the therapist know how your brain is responding. This information is then used to adjust your next treatment. Side effects may include nightmares, insomnia, feelings of anxiety, brain fog, headaches, or nothing dangerous or permanent. It just might trip you up for a little while.
Yeah, like imagine so like it's it's imagine like our brain is like a car. You've got to drive your car around to get to and from work to do the things you want to do, and you're doing a little bit of rewiring while you're driving your car around. That's like, okay, I might not have finished rewiring the tail lights or the turn signals fully in, but I've got to go to the work the next day, so they might still be a little glitchy, if you will, right? But it isn't permanent. Uh, and when you begin like this rewiring process, or even if you begin other therapies, there can be a destabilizing period that feels that way just because you're opening up, because you're becoming vulnerable, because you're beginning to access things that haven't been accessed for a while. Often very normal in all the therapies I've experienced, but at least I'll say most therapies.
So, what to look for in, in a neurofeedback therapist? Licensed mental health professionals who have been trained to use neurofeedback equipment and programs can provide neurofeedback services in their private practices and clinics. In addition to finding someone with the educational background and the relevant experience, look for a therapist whom you feel comfortable discussing personal issues with. It doesn't matter if they got the machine. If you're not comfortable talking to that person for whatever reason, they are not the right person for you.
Go.
So you want somebody that displays an understanding of your particular case and who can clearly explain neurofeedback, its potential benefits, its limitations in a way that you can understand. Please know that you're not going to go in there, have a couple of probes stuck to your head, and then all of a sudden be cured in one session. This is definitely a therapy. Think of it as physical therapy, right? You go in there, you exercise for a little bit, they give you a couple of stretches, you keep coming back, right? You're not automatically going to go out and bench press 500 pounds. You keep coming back. Something needs to be tweaked, and it needs to be tweaked slowly, right? They're not going to just straighten your back, with one fell swoop and send you on your way. It doesn't work like that. You need to keep coming back. You need to also be addressing the other issues that may be causing whatever problems you're having through regular therapy, through counseling, through whatever it is that you're doing in your daily regimen. This is an additional tool to put in your tool belt so that you can continue a progression to something better.
It's a
So, in
powerful
order to
tool.
find a neurofeedback
Absolutely.
therapist, sorry,
Um, it's a powerful tool. Absolutely. It's one that I believe strongly in. And it is just one of many tools, like Rod said, often used very well in combination with other things. Even when I experienced it at the highest end, like I went to the highest end of this, you were paired with a therapist. Mine actually, and we'll get in the story a little bit more, but ended up being an ex Army Ranger. And so he had a tremendous amount of experience with understanding people, knowing about, let's say, the more challenging things that you can experience in life, and this incredible ability to be with you through it all, and a very, very deep, compassionate nature that was easy to trust, right? So, like, that paired with the neurofeedback allowed me to get the rewiring benefits of the neurofeedback and to have the therapeutic benefits of somebody to be able to talk to feel understood, to work things out.
Okay. If you'd like to find a neurofeedback therapist in your area, please feel free to go to this website, www.forbes.com /health /mind /what is neurofeedback therapy /. Again, Forbes.com, health, mind, what is neurofeedback therapy? So, what is a neurofeedback session like, Chris? That
So there's different levels of this, and what I do want to preface this with is, I went in, uh, as I sometimes do, like, rather than dipping my feet in, I just jumped into the ocean, and I went with some people who have been doing this for years, right? And I went to the high end. So when I say, and if you look at the price on the thing, like, I paid in total about $20,000 for a $6 6 days of sessions, that were all packed together. But the purpose of this was different than typical neurofeedback therapy. This was a very intensive rewiring of the brain. um, I would say akin to, instead of going and having a personal trainer and starting slow, it was jumping into Olympic level weightlifting and just like running with it. Right. So, number one, this is typically way more affordable. Number two, you tend to go a lot slower. But the benefits and the experience are very much the same. I just happened to jump in at this level, and I jumped in with people. One of them in particular wasn't able to do some of the other therapies and had really found this to be profound for him. He wasn't able to do some of the other therapies when we start talking about plant medicine or other medicinal therapies because of his previous history as an addict. And so those were off the table. He found that for him, especially in this more intense way, he was able to get the benefits that would come from the other therapies in a way that still worked with him, his history, his biology, right? So 40 Years of Zen is a company and a program put together by Dave Asprey of Bulletproof. The coffee, the supplements, the biohackingness, and Dr. Drew. Dr. Drew is the neuroscientist who helped to like create the program, explore it. Often very much a pioneer in this realm, as well as some other people. And uh, when I say this was an intense experience, what I mean was it wasn't just going in for an hour session, which most like neurofeedback therapy would be, and going in for an hour and then coming back in a week or so. Instead, it was literally uh, 10-hour days of constant flipping back and forth between like doing neurofeedback, going to the therapy session, doing more neurofeedback, uh, therapy session, etc. And we did this for 6 days long, and we were packed full of supplements to help the brain adapt. Again, it's much like if you were doing Olympic weightlifting, you'd have a very different support regimen than if you were just working out once a week. So, with that caveat, the beauty is I got to experience a months of neurofeedback therapy within this very compacted time. And even with that compacting, what I found for me was this amazingness. Now, at first, my first couple of sessions that I did, I felt, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, I felt down, right? I felt like I wasn't getting it, because what happens is they put all the electrodes onto your head. And in this case, I was in like a little isolated pod. And then you're just told, cool, when you hear the little ding, you're doing it right. Just concentrate on the ding and get more dings. And I remember doing that, and it's like I get a ding now and then, and I get another ding, and then sometimes I get like 3 dings, and then I get no dings, and I'm like, I think I'm fucking this up. Like, I don't think I'm very good at this, and which is normal for me. I can be judgmental and hard on myself. And then we go into the therapy session, and the therapy session, I would open up because this was a beautiful gentleman. His name was Travis, um, and just so loving and trusting, and yet had experienced so much in life. And I would share the things I was working on, the things I was moving through, and then I would share my frustration. And he's like, Chris, have you ever done this before? I'm like, no, but I've meditated before. I should get this immediately. He's like, you've never done this before. Like, imagine jumping in a car and never having seen a car and then being like, I can't drive this freaking thing, or jumping on a bike and falling over a bunch of times because you've never ridden a bike. Like, just give it a little bit of time, man. Um, by the end of that day, probably session 3, it began to click for me. And again, the fascinating thing for me was when I wasn't pushing myself so hard, the brain began to do this on its own. There is this, again, natural reward mechanism of just be present. And the ding, oh, it's a nice ding. And instead of like, brain, make the ding, make the ding, make the ding. Like, it was just like, oh, that's a nice ding. And it began to ding more and more and more. And the beauty was, and this is what I really like about neurofeedback therapy, because you're getting that immediate feedback and you know you're on the right track, you also then link that, oh, okay, I'm doing the right thing, with how it feels in the body, right? So for me, being an alpha has a very particular feeling in the body. And the beauty of learning that is not only is the brain rewiring itself and cutting deeper neuro pathways to allow you to get into these states easier and easier, um, but it's also, you can feel what that state feels like. So even without the neurofeedback device, you know when you're there, right? It's like driving someplace via Google Maps a bunch of times, but you're paying attention along the way. And then, if this is the place that you go to work, well, by the third or fourth time that you've driven there, you don't need Google Maps anymore. You just drive, and you're able to get to work perfectly fine, beautiful, without all of the stuff to get you there. Um, I found it truly profound. It had taken my meditative practice and some of the benefits that I'd receive. When we talked about meditation, forget which episode that is, but Zazen meditation, where I really felt it in my body, and it married it up with the ability to get back to that state at will, and to know when I was in the state. And just as important, to be able to utilize the different states for different things. Like I shared earlier, like to be able to relax and go down into theta, which can be used for creativity, like Salvador Dali did, but can also be used for those things that are emotional, or anything that we don't really know or understand. They're kind of beyond words. They're beyond the consciousness. And then bring myself back up into alpha, where, like, it's the same analogy I used before. It's like putting your hands down into like the water and pulling up a handful of mud, and then just watching it dissolve, and practicing forgiveness and appreciation and gratitude and compassion and love. And literally it just dissolves, and then it's gone. And doing that like over and over again in this little repetitive thing, it can be a bit emotionally, well, I was doing it in a very intensive way, so it was emotionally taxing for me. And it was definitely took a lot of calories to keep the brain burning at the level that I was going. But typically, if you're doing this on the standard regiment, an hour or two a week, just like with physical therapy, it's not strenuous, but you will feel like you've done a bit of work. Um, I believe in this so much. We'll talk about this in a moment. That I have invested in a company that allows for that $20,000 experience to end up in somebody's home for a fraction of the price. But before we talk about that, uh, this is the one of the easier feedback devices. Now, this isn't exactly neurofeedback that we've been talking about, but it does much the same thing. And this is the least expensive version that I'm aware of that can help you, especially with meditation and getting into the alpha brain wavelength state. So, HeartMath has studied the alpha brain wavelength state and how to apply that to well-being, how to apply that to greater health, how to apply that to trauma and PTSD, both old traumas and PTSD as well as like in the moment ones, and are using this with special forces, with first responders, with police, etc. Like right now, using it quite a bit. They have a device that clips to your ear, connects to your phone via Bluetooth. Now, it's not reading your brain wavelengths, but what they found is if you can measure your heart rate variability, you have an indication that tells you whether you're in the alpha state. They call it brain heart coherence. Um, if you're in that state or not. And you are getting that same thing. If you look at the app, which you see a little bit of here in the picture on the show, or you can go to heartmath.com/tech, and you can see the device as well. You are getting immediate and in the moment feedback, and this has been so powerful. Now, this device, if you get it, the app is free. The device costs when it's on sale, which it is right now because of the holidays, $150, typically about $200. But for that price, you can get immediate feedback and it'll tell you exactly when you're in the zone and when you're not in the zone. Think about it like when if you choose to use a heart rate monitor when you're exercising, the benefit is when you're in the zone that you want to be in or you're out of the zone. You know immediately, and you can adjust in the moment for better performance, for a better experience. That's what this does. Now, if you'll do the next one. Now, the next device is what I've invested in. So full disclosure, I do have an orientation towards this device because I truly believe it is the best solution out there for neurofeedback in your home, to be able to not just do this in a therapeutic session, but to also use it for other ways to rewire your brain and to have access on a day basis. I chose to invest in this because I didn't want to wait once or twice a year to go spend an insane amount of money to do this over and over again. And when I was there doing 40 years of Zen, I got a demo of this product in its super beta stage. And I got to watch Dr. Drew, who helped to develop the 40 Years of Zen company and protocol, experience it and be wowed by it. And so what this does is it's a headset you put on, and it also has other things to it. So it's got these special sensors that don't require any gel. You don't have to have the weird gel cap and end up with like weird hair. They just fit on, and it reads your brain wavelengths with an incredible amount of fidelity. So most of the devices out there can read beta, alpha, and theta pretty well, but they only read a small part of the brain instead of looking across the brain to see how much of the brain is in coherence. And almost nothing out there until you get to the clinical grade stuff can actually read and help you get into gamma because it's such a high resolution or a high brain wavelength that requires very good sensors to be able to read. And this does all of that. Plus, it has photobiomodulation, which means you can use light to stimulate parts of the brain to make this even easier, right? So imagine stimulating the brain subtly and carefully, but that allows this to work better. And it has a little sensor in the ear cup to be able to read heart rate variability, just like the HeartMath device. So it's pulling all of that together. And essentially right now, this is not a sales pitch, but I so deeply believe in this. I invested a good amount of money in this company, not just because I felt that it would benefit the world, but because I wanted this to become real so I could have one that I get to use on an everyday basis. And I believe in this so much that when they came out with the beta ones, I didn't try to throw my weight around to say, give me one of those. I let them go to the people who would be greater influencers to help this company succeed. and I ordered one off of Indiegogo just like any other person did. So I've not only invested my money in, I've bought a headset that will arrive soon, and then I'll be able to use this just like you will. Uh, but it's on Indiegogo right now. The normal price for this is $1,500, which isn't cheap, but compared to everything else, and knowing that you could use this like literally every day if you wanted, though I would say don't have to go that intense. You can use it every few days or a few times a week. Um, and it's guided by this app that is so carefully crafted. It unlocks different things that you can do as you get better. So it's like a personal trainer. Um, is it going to recommend that you run a marathon when right now it's a challenge for you to get up and walk around the block? No, it's going to guide you just like a really caring therapist would in being able to go, let's walk around the block a few times. Let's build that up. Cool. You can walk around the block. How about you jog for a couple of minutes and then walk a little bit, and then jog for a couple of minutes and walk a little bit? And it builds you up carefully from there while still giving you the options of what is it you're trying to build. Like, do you want to be able to go into alpha and have that peaceful, compassionate state and process emotions? Do you want to be able to go into theta and get creativity or to pull stuff up out of the unconscious? Do you want to be able to go up into gamma and feel that peace with the world spiritual state? Like, you get those things. And there are protocols specifically around different things like trauma, etc. Right? So it's very well guided. What I will say about this is I truly believe that this is a world-class device. I'm not saying that just because I've invested in the company. Like, I freaking believe in this. Um, I would also, knowing what I know, experience what I've experienced, I would still pair this with some other type of therapy. I would pair this with talk therapy. I would pair this with something else that you're doing so that as experiences come up, as emotions come up, as things in your life come through, that you have somebody to help you understand them. You have somebody to help you integrate them. You have somebody to help you feel safe when challenging emotions and stuff come up and come through. And so while this is a device that you could use in the comfort of your home that is literally as powerful as things that used to cost $20,000. I'm not talking about, I mean, like devices, like the headsets and stuff that I used at 40 Years of Zen cost, depending on which one you're using, I think between $20,000 to $50,000 a piece, right? So it's just like the old cell phones becoming the new cell phones that cost next to nothing for, doing the same thing. It is that, and it is a tool. It is a component that you can add to your complete therapeutic journey to be able to pair again with talk therapy or something else for a better experience. So um, I'm obviously a fan, but you don't have to trust me on this. Go check it out. Feel your own way through it. If it's right for you, do it. If it's not right for you, don't do it. I'm buying multiple because not only do I want them for myself, I want to be able to take them places and have other people experience them. Uh, the website for it it's called Sensei, sense.ai. The website is sens.ai. And if you go there and you go to like buy or whatever else, it forwards you over to the Indiegogo page, which right now has 14 days left. And that's where you can get it for $1,000 instead of $1,500. Yeah, I know I've just shared a lot. I've shared a ton. I'm a bit excited. Rod, this is new for you and anybody who's out there who's listening as well. If you have any questions, pose them, not just about this device, but about the entire thing of neurofeedback and where the benefits are, even pitfalls or questions or concerns.
Again, for me, it's new. Yes and no. I have read about people like Salvador Dali or even Pancho Villa that would limit their sleep, try to get into certain patterns in order to become more aware and kind of shape the person that they were. So I know this kind of stuff has been around forever and a day. So it's definitely not new. I just never really understood what they were doing by it. It's like, why would you want to do that? Why don't you want to get a full night's sleep? And as I was reading through this, I'm like, well, maybe I'm doing it too because I've had PTSD for so long. A good night's sleep seems almost dreamy right now. I don't get a lot of that deep sleep myself, so it's kind of like, well, is it? Isn't it? Is it beneficial? Uh, is it detrimental to my health? I don't know. I don't know.
Well, what's interesting with that is so the benefits to this, and again, why I can't wait to get my hands on a headset, is you can help the brain rewire for a whole variety of things, right? So you can help it rewire for executive function, which is basically being able to make decisions easier and more quickly. That benefits somebody's life.
Yeah.
You can rewire it to help reverse the challenges and the miswiring that trauma has given. You can also rewire for greater relaxation and sleep. So, like, there are protocols to help you actually sleep more deeply, more restorative, and everything else, right? It's the brain and neuroplasticity means that you have a lot of adjustability and even control over how this is wired, what it does, and how it operates. And a tool like neurofeedback is simply giving you the immediate feedback, just like Rod said, a coach who's there with you, a trainer who's there with you, helping you do the movements in exactly the right way so that you get the most benefit with the least amount of effort and the least amount of time. Um, and you get to guide where that goes, right? Again, we're focused on helping with trauma, PTSD, depression, all of those things, but the benefits go well beyond there. How would you like to have be able to remember more numbers? How would you like to have greater clarity of thought? How would you like to be able to make decisions easier? How would you like to have more creativity? How would you like to feel more peaceful? Like, all of these things are available. Again, it's not a silver bullet. You're not going to just do it once and done. But just like working with your trainer, the results come faster and faster, but they still require consistency and your continual showing up.
Well, if there are no questions tonight, thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week. And remember, it's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness.
Big love. Looked forward to seeing you next week.
Good night, folks. Have a good weekend.